All right. Well, this is another episode of Get Your Head in the Game podcast. I am Dr. Ross, and I am a mental performance consultant and trainer, and I work with athletes on optimizing their mindset. And so today we have our guest, Bertrand Berry, who's been on previously, and we're super excited to have him here. He is an NFL All-Pro, played for the Arizona Cardinals, and has since now done a lot of great things and trains and mentors young athletes in the same position that he played. So we are excited to have you back again today and to carry on our conversation from previously. So thank you.
Thanks for having me again. I definitely love what you're doing. And I mean, it's just growing and growing, and so very proud and happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a whirlwind of figuring out how to do the whole podcast thing and the topics, because there's so much that we could talk on with mental health and mindset. And, you shared your experience last time, and that's very, valuable for these young athletes. But today I just kind of wanted to focus in on the topic of self-talk. You had mentioned the last time you were on about just deciding that this is the direction I was going to go with my career, and that there was some outside voices and things, obstacles, obviously, that came in your way. But how important for you was maintaining that belief in yourself and maintaining the fact that you knew this is what you're going to do? And how did, I guess, your own thoughts and self-talk come into play?
Well, I think self-affirmation is vital to any person that's trying to do anything in any walk of life. If you don't believe in yourself first, it's going to be very difficult for other people to believe in you. And I knew that during the real lean times and the tough times, especially that year that I was out of the league, that there were a lot of people that were saying he didn't want to play. He's not committed to the game. He's not invested fully. He doesn't care about the game. And that couldn't have been further from the truth. I knew my truth, and I had to continue to tell myself that over and over and over again, even when there wasn't evidence of there being a chance that I would actually get back into the league. But again, I can't overstate how much it's important to believe in yourself first before anybody else will believe in you.
Yeah, come back to that. You knew your truth. So how did you remind yourself of that in those tough moments?
I just had to say, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I still believed in my heart that I had more to offer the game. Every time I turned on the game, every time I watched it, I just had this feeling that I still was connected to it, that I still had a place in the NFL and in professional football. And so even though I was upset at times, even though I was clinically depressed, as some people would say, I still had that belief in myself that all I need is that one person. I just need one person to believe in me, one person to give me that opportunity. And if I get that opportunity, I'm going to take it and literally run with it. And I was fortunate enough to get that opportunity. And when I got to the Denver Broncos, there was a popular song around 2001 by Destiny's Child. It was called Say My Name, Say My Name. And it was something that when I was in practice and I was in camp, I kind of adopted that, where I said to myself, I'm going to make these coaches say my name in a positive way every single day. So if they have to say my name in a positive way every single day, that's going to far outweigh any negative thing that may have been said about me in the past, or any bad play that I may have had during the course of practice that day. So there was always going to be something positive that I left them with every single day. And I really believe that that was one of the main reasons I was able to ultimately make the roster when they really didn't have a lot of space for me.
Yeah. Wow. So your positivity outweighed your negativity in those moments. And that song, Say My Name, Say My Name, that song was kind of like, it sounds like you adopted that as your mantra to kind of carry you through. Yeah, I was going to say what. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Doc. Go ahead.
I was going to say how, we all have songs, right, that we listen to, but I guess how did you stumble upon that one for this? Like, that's just an interesting one.
Well, Dr. Jen, I mean, it was everywhere. As you remember, Destiny's Child was everywhere in 2001. I mean, there wasn't a radio station that you could turn on, or there wasn't a TV outlet, that played videos that didn't have a Destiny Child song or that particular song playing at some point during the course of the day. And so I just kept hearing it over and over and over. And I just said to myself, you know what? I'm going to make the coaches do exactly that. I'm going to have that same effect on them that Destiny Child has on me, and I'm sure millions of others who are listening to the radio or watching TV. And so it just kind of became something that I held on to. I didn't tell a lot of people that. I kept it to myself. And that's another thing about my truth. It's not a conference call when you start talking about belief in yourself. You don't
Yes.
have to let everybody know what you're doing or what you're thinking. And so it was something that I just held in my own heart, and I really tried to just go out and apply it every single day without having to boast and say, hey, look at me. I want you to say my name in a
Yeah.
positive way.
Yeah, I love that. So, singing it in the shower to yourself and then go to practice and just keep it on the down low, right? Not going
Absolutely. That's right. That's right.
um
That's right.
so no, that's super awesome and powerful to have something like that. I think it's important for these young athletes to hear that and to see that, like, you talked about being clinically depressed and going through that phase of your life. Yet at the same time, there was still that hope for something more. So I think that's the thing for these young athletes to realize is like you have a choice. So how much did you realize, like, by adopting that song, that mantra, that was you choosing, this is who I'm going to be and this is what I'm going to do.
Well, I knew that I didn't have much else to hold on to.
Right.
If I looked at the roster every single day, I was fifth deep. And in the NFL, there is no fifth deep. So I knew that it was going to be a challenge to even get opportunities to show what I could do. And all I wanted to do was just focus in on every single play, every chance I got my name called, to go out there and make something happen that was going to be in my favor. I couldn't worry about the circumstances of teammates making mistakes on plays. I couldn't worry about if coaches were having a bad day, if the overall team was having a bad day. All I could do was lock in on my particular job and do that. And if I
Mm-hmm.
focused in on doing my job, then everything else was just going to take care of itself. I couldn't get too up. I couldn't get too down. I had to stay right there, even keel, and make
Right.
sure that I stayed focused on the task at hand. And it ruffled some feathers at times. I'm not going to say that it was always received well. My attitude and my actions on the field were I had to do what I had to do. And I think sometimes my teammates were a little put off by that because they felt like I was just trying to show off or show them up.
Right.
But they didn't understand my level of desperation. They didn't understand what I had gone through the previous year, and I was bound and determined not to ever feel that way again. And so even though eventually I won those guys over, I think until they understood and really had conversations with me off the field and understood what I had gone through, it was going to be difficult for them to really grasp and appreciate what it is that I was doing on a day-to-day basis to try to keep myself in the NFL and not get kicked out again.
Yeah, they didn't understand your backstory and
No.
that whole side of it. A lot of times people don't see, they only see what's in front of them, right? And so not
Correct.
knowing that what you went through that year that you were out of the league and experiencing some of those hardships, mentally and physically, made you fight harder for where you were at in the present moment. So tell me, did you share any of that with any of those players, kind of what you experienced? Did you have anyone that you confided in or talked about about that?
I had one teammate, a guy that when I first got to Denver, he was kind enough to let me stay with him because it was difficult for me to even afford to have a place of my own. When I first got to Denver, I think the first month they gave me lodging in a hotel.
Oh,
And
wow.
so after that, I didn't have much because any money that I made from the Cardinals from the off-season checks, I had to take back home. I had a very young family and I just had a daughter. And so there was no extra money to even have a place of my own. So the fact that he was willing to open up his home to me and give me a place to put my head down at night, I could never repay Keith Washington. And big shout out to Keith Washington. We still talk on a regular basis. That's my guy forever. We're both from Texas. So we bonded with that first. And with him, he understood my struggle because he was at once upon a time a guy like myself. He was a free agent, a guy that didn't a lot of people expect a lot from. And so we bonded on that. The fact that we were from the same part of the country and we both had similar stories as far as our journey in the NFL, it really led him to open up his heart and his home to me. And that's something I could never repay.
Yeah. So would you say he was kind of pivotal for you in overcoming some of those hard times you were going through mentally and, just with the process that you were in with transitioning to playing again?
Dr. Jen, he was my biggest cheerleader. He was the guy that if I had a bad day, if I felt the weight of the world, he was there to kind of lift it off of my shoulders because we were at the very opposite ends of the spectrum. He had just come free agent from a Super Bowl champion with the Baltimore Ravens. And here I am, a free agent off the street, not knowing if I'm going to make it day for day. And he just kept instilling that confidence in me. Hey, keep going. You're doing the right thing. Keep up the good work. You're making a difference out there. They see you. They can see what you're doing. And it was that type of motivation and that type of encouragement that was so key. It was instrumental to me just staying with it and not getting discouraged during the course of that training camp and off season. And so he was everything for me at that time. And in order to have that level of success coming from those type of situations, you have to have somebody in your corner. And I was just so thankful that I had Keith Washington in my corner.
Yeah. So not only with your own self-talk and your own thoughts, because there's always going to be those people that are negative. And so your own self-talk sometimes isn't enough. So having him, that positive influence on the outside, feeding into you and reminding you of those things in those tough moments, because sometimes we can't do it all ourselves. Sometimes we have bad days. We have days where, it is, like you said, it's just the weight of the world is on you. And you need that one person to come alongside you and kind of remind you, encourage you, and feed into you in positive ways. So that's a great reminder, for younger athletes, is like not only choosing your own thoughts and the self-talk that you have for yourself, but choosing who you surround yourself with.
Dr. Jen, it's so important to have a tight circle and have people that are like-minded and really about doing the right things. And I think you need to have people that are a little more advanced than you and have a little more success than you, because if everybody's on the same level, then, there's really nothing to aspire to in the group, So I always try to surround myself with people that are smarter than me, more successful than me, because that gives me something to shoot for. It gives me something to aspire to. And I think that's healthy. And at that time, he was key for me. And there have been people like that throughout the course of my life. And even now, with what I do, there's always people that I can talk to and that have done it longer than I have, that can give me pointers and kind of tell me where the pitfalls are and how to avoid them and how to not go the direction where you may see pitfalls in the future. So there's always help. Nobody can be successful in and of themselves. You have to have help, and that's how we're meant to be human. We're not meant to do this alone. We're meant to share this with others, and that's one of those tried and true ways to be successful.
Yes, otherwise it's like the blind leading the blind, right?
Oh my gosh.
Nobody has no idea what's going on. You gotta
That's
put
right.
people in your corner that have some clue and experience as to what, can recommend and be there as you navigate these things. And I'm finding that out in, my business that I'm doing now is there's so much, and you realize that there's so much you don't know. And you really have to put those people in your life that have been there, have walked through it, and can kind of give you some guidance, not to say that they have to tell you what to do, but they can give their input. And as long as it's a positive influence for you and not somebody who's going to drag you down, that's what we need, I think, for those challenging times that we face.
Dr. Jen, I think it's important too. You have to have those people that are super positive and encouraging and always giving you that life, that energy that you can do it. I think it's also important too. I've got a good friend that I've been friends with since I was 8 years old, and he's a guy that he can check me. He's a guy that can tell me, hey man, I don't think what you're doing is good, or what you did back then was not smart. So just like you have the people that are positive and are reaffirming, and in that respect, I also think having him as a guy to tell me no and tell me that's not the way to go, and that's not a great choice in your wardrobe, or I wouldn't have said that, or I wouldn't have done that. I think that's equally as important. So it gives you that balance of, okay, you're doing what's right, and hey, you're not doing what's right. Let's bring that back level. So, there's always that system of checks and balances.
Yeah, absolutely. Accountability too, with what direction you are taking. Because sometimes, people want to give us fluff and tell us, yeah, we're in the right, we're doing the right thing. And it's like, well, hold on, like back up a second. And having that one person that can ground you, keep you grounded through it all, and not just give you that, positivity all the time. I mean, as much as we want to be positive like that, we also have to be real, I think, in the fact of what we're doing, what we're saying, and our actions, and having someone to kind of keep us in check. So shifting gears a little bit, I'm curious because, your son is playing sports now in football. And, you being experienced and having walked in those shoes, like, how are you now kind of being that positive influence for him and for watching him go through some of the things that you've experienced?
Dr. Jen, it's a fine line. I love my son. Obviously, I want the best for him. I really have to walk that balance between being a father and being a coach. Obviously, what I do, he plays the position that I played, and coaching him is one of my life's joy, to be very honest. He's my favorite client. I love working with him because I see a lot of myself in him, but I also have to be very careful and not to be overly critical, and know when to take a step back and just be dad, because he understands that I have a wealth of knowledge to give him, but sometimes that's not what he needs in the moment. Sometimes he just needs dad to be like, hey son, it's going to be all right. No matter if you didn't complete the mission, I'm still proud of you. You're still my son. I still love you, regardless of whether you win the game or you lose the game. So having to walk that line these last 3 months have been one of the biggest challenges of my life. I'll be, real candid with that, but it's been fun. It's been a learning experience, and it's been something that I truly believe will make me a better teacher and a better coach for guys that aren't my son, and be able to relate to them in a way that maybe I hadn't been able to relate to before, and having my son to throw in that mix, to be like, hey, sometimes you gotta pull back. Sometimes you gotta crack the whip, figuratively, and say, hey, I got to get on you. You got to do this and this and this and this, but then know when to wrap your arms around him and be like, hey, I love you. I'm proud of you. You're doing a great job. And so far, so good. I think he's taken it in stride. I think he's taken the lessons that I've given him, and he's going out and applying them. I'm definitely proud. Every time I see him make a play, it my heart comes out of my chest, and I'm just a proud dad, and
awesome.
Also a proud coach. So it's almost like I feel the pride twofold.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because I wonder, if by coaching him, you see him as your son, but you're also his coach, and now relating that to other clients. Sometimes I know it was this way for me when I was a drill sergeant, is I would start to see the soldiers that I was leading as my own kids. And there was just
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of empathy that I had. And so finding that balance, I think it makes you more empathetic towards the clients that you now take on, is because it's you see that investment in how it impacts people. And you're able to kind of put yourself in their shoes for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And so super important, if you're going to be a leader, like you mentioned, you knew like, okay, this is a moment for me to take a step back and just be dad, right? And that's what he needs in this moment. And you as a leader are able to read that and adapt to it. And so sometimes I think we get off track with leadership because we think it's my way or the highway type of deal. And that's not necessarily the best way, right? So
I've definitely
share on leading on your experience with that.
I've definitely failed at times, and I think in those failures, I've learned way more than in the times where I was really successful. And I think in those moments where I failed, it allowed me to see him differently. It allowed me to see him as a kid that's really trying to figure this thing out. He's only played the position that I played for basically 3 months now. And you're trying to pour all of this knowledge, you're trying to pour 30 years of knowledge into 3 months. And sometimes that can be overwhelming. And I have to remember he's 16 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to get it all right. And
Yeah.
I think anticipating that and knowing that there's going to be those moments. It's great opportunities to teach him. And I haven't gotten it right every single time. To say that I've been able to, negotiate the difference between being a dad and being a coach, I didn't always get it right. But the thing that I ultimately found was key for him was to allow him to have a voice and to ask him, hey, how you feeling? How is this going? How do you feel like this relationship is
Mm-hmm.
going? Do you need me to back up? Do you need me to be more assertive? How can I best serve you in this moment and you be able to receive it the best? And we had a very candid conversation about 4 weeks ago, and it was one of those where I had to sit and listen. And I
Mm-hmm.
think talking about being a leader and sometimes messing it up, I think I was under the impression that I had to always lead and be the one to give directions and to speak my mind. But you also have to be able to listen and be able to let him speak his mind. Because if he never gets to speak his mind, he's going to be turned off. And so I think it was a very healthy conversation. I think it helped us grow stronger, not only as coach and client, but also as father and son. I think it was a moment that was a watershed one for us, and we've definitely benefited since.
Wow. Yeah. The communication piece of it. Um, I think we forget sometimes about the power of listening and hearing other people and what they're going through. And even, you talking about the friend that you had when you were in Denver that was there,
Mm-hmm.
that's what made that relationship, was that he was there to listen and without judgment, in all transparency and honesty, and listen. And we forget that that is critical when it comes to building those relationships and keeping that positivity around. So have you, with your son, have you recognized any of his, self-talk, any of his beliefs, his thoughts about himself? Like, have you been kind of able to feed into that in a positive way?
The thing that's so funny about that, Dr. Jen, is nowadays a lot of young people, I use that loosely, young people, they use social media as their conscience. If
Mhm.
you were to go on Instagram or go on Twitter and look at the post, they're basically putting their thoughts out there and they're basically telling you what they're thinking in that moment. And that's very scary, to put your thoughts out there every
Right.
single day and let the world know exactly what you're thinking. And I know for me, that would not have been a good thing when I was his age, to have that type of access to my thoughts and 10 years down the road, go back and read what I wrote back
Right.
then, I would cringe to think what was on my mind at 16 years old, which is 31 years ago, but not to date myself, but back that's a
Right.
long time ago.
Right.
And
Yeah.
and so, I think the aspect of social media has given me a huge advantage in that even when he may not say it to me directly, I can just go to his page, not to spy on him or anything like that, but just to get an idea of what's going on with him.
Mm-hmm.
I really try to check in with him on a regular basis as far as how he's doing and how he's feeling about the transition, because it's still early
Mm-hmm.
in football years. He's still very young
Yes.
in his growth and development.
Mm-hmm.
One, playing the sport overall, but more importantly, playing the position in the last 3 months. That's not a lot of time. So I'm constantly trying to pick his brain, see where he feels like
Right.
he's gotten better, and also see where he feels like he needs to work on and maybe pick up a little bit. So having the communication open between the two of us has been a godsend. And as long as he's
Yeah.
willing to talk, I'm willing to listen. And the more information I have, the better I can help him ultimately reach the goal of what he wants to reach.
Yeah, that's a good point you bring up. Social media has a profound impact on uh, people's own beliefs about themselves. The idea of just talking about self-talk. If they're going on social media and they're looking at these things, and then the thoughts that come from that, and then they start to speak that into themselves. And whether it's good or bad, we make it part of our identity. And that's the
Mhm.
scary part, I think, is like we really have to keep those thoughts in check before they become part of our identity. And we believe that about ourselves, and that could be detrimental for a 16-year-old kid to now start to form that part of his identity based on, like you mentioned earlier, truth, but non-truth, because it's based on culture, society, and what social media says. Um,
Dr. Jen, I think it could be detrimental for a 47-year-old
oh,
man.
true. Yes,
And
true.
so,
Yeah.
I think some thoughts are meant to challenge us in ways, but
Mhm.
I don't think we're supposed to give every thought the same amount of weight, because some of them are
Absolutely.
supposed to be in one ear and out the other. Like, okay, that
Hmm.
thought comes in your mind. Okay, that's crazy. We're going to let that pass. And then
Hmm.
other thoughts are going to come into your mind, and maybe you spend a little time with it, you wrestle with it, give it more thought, and you move on. And I just think with social media, the aspect of that, you have much more of both. And so you're
Yes.
bombarded with positive thoughts, you're bombarded with negative thoughts. And I think it's tougher to be a teenager now, because
Hmm.
we didn't have the visual stimulus that
Hmm.
these young people have today. And when you start talking about self-talk, if you're constantly bombarding yourself with the wrong thing, it can definitely affect how you feel about yourself. And so you have to be able to manage in a way how much social media you're allowing your kids, but then how much you're allowing yourself, because
Hmm.
just like they could be susceptible to it, I could be susceptible to it. I'm not going to
Hmm.
sit here and say I've got it all figured out and I do it all right every single time. So it's a great lesson and a
Yes.
great exercise, even for myself, to sometimes, hey, put the phone down, just kind of be with yourself, be quiet a little bit, and whatever thoughts that are going through your mind, let's break them down, and the ones that don't need to be there, let's go ahead and kick those out.
Yeah, exactly. That's really good because it's almost like a gateway for comparison. And I was thinking about that the other day, like how many times do we compare ourselves, whether it's us as adults or for your son to compare himself to the next person. And that, if you allow that to take root, will kill your motivation, it will discourage you. And social media is the prime location to compare yourself with people, and that is not the truth. So I love that you say, hey, maybe take some time to sit and just manage it on your own, like in a quiet space or in, on your own time, and being able to process through some of those things. And again, it comes back to that choice of, what do I want to allow? What do I want to choose to be that voice that feeds me, the voice that's in my head that feeds my thoughts, and which ultimately feeds my beliefs. So super powerful there. So any other thoughts or things you want to share? I mean, self-talk is a huge topic, and, it really is a powerful tool, I think, for younger athletes to understand that the power of those things they say can create their reality. So, anything else you want to share on that?
I think the one thing, Dr. Jenna, that I want young athletes and anybody to really understand is that in the past, talking to yourself made you sound crazy. People were saying, why are you talking to yourself?
Right.
Your lips are moving, but you're not saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to check in with yourself. I think as I've gotten older, I realized that, those by myself meetings are some of the most important meetings I could have. Because if I'm not fully together with my own thoughts, how am I going to go out and face whatever is going to come my way during the course of a day? You have to be good with yourself first before anybody else can
Right.
come in and add value to your day or whatever. So that self-talk, that I literally try to schedule by myself meetings every single day. Whereas when I was young, that sounded crazy. That sounded like foolish talk. Why are you talking to yourself? There's all types of songs out there, and
Right.
people say you're schizophrenic. It's like, no, it's I'm all one person, but that doesn't mean that I have the same exact thoughts every single day, and I have to make sure that before I go and take on the world, that, that I'm good with myself, and that, I'm in a good space from an emotional standpoint and a mental standpoint.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That, and, talking to yourself, or I like to encourage athletes to get a performance journal or a journal and just write, and it's that talking to yourself that's processing those thoughts. And when you're speaking out loud, you're taking it from here to here, and it's allowing you to integrate that and process that. And there's a lot of power in that, because if it's a thought that's not healthy for you, you don't want to leave it there and let it linger, right? You want to get it out, you want to process it. And journaling is just one way, but like you said, you could just talk to yourself, have that quiet time where you talk to yourself. Some people meditate, some people pray, whatever it might be to kind of ground you in that moment. And then, like you said, you can go out throughout your day and be in a better place mentally because of that.
Yeah, and I truly believe too, lastly, that what you say when you start your day, like when you first get out of bed, and whatever thoughts are in your head, and if they're not positive, they can really have an impact on how your day is going to go. I mean, if you wake up and you're telling yourself negative things, then chances are you're not going to be in the best of moods, and it's probably not going to be the day that it could have been and should have been. So, words are very powerful. Even when you're speaking to yourself, make sure that you are kind and forgiving and positive with yourself before you can be those things to other people.
Yes, that's good. That's good stuff. Definitely. I think, being kind to ourselves is something that, especially as an athlete, there's a tendency to be our worst critic and be hard on ourselves more than even the people around us. Whether I say athlete, but you could just be a high performer. It doesn't have to be in sports. You could just be your personality. And I've experienced that myself, where I'm my own worst critic, and that's where you really have to be careful, because those thoughts can get away from you if you allow them to. So it's good.
Absolutely.
Good points. Well, yeah, this has been an awesome conversation. I thank you for coming back on again. And hopefully some nuggets of wisdom on the topic of self-talk our listeners could have gathered. So super helpful. Again, thank you. This is Bertrand Berry, All-Pro for the NFL, Arizona Cardinals player, and grateful to have you here today. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Dr. Jenna. Always a pleasure.